Ron Allen's weather, and Steve Harms with sports. Now, KMGH 7 News.
First thing you do is cry. After you get that out of the way, then you can start cleaning up.
Residents in the city of Cheyenne, Wyoming are still reeling today after a freak storm pounded them with hail and rain that filled their streets and made them raging rivers.
11 people are dead. Another 7 people are still missing in the wake of the worst storm to ever hit the area. Most of those who were killed were probably trapped in cars that were swept from the road by floodwaters from swollen streams. At least one of the dead was trapped in her basement. Tonight, our team coverage of Nature's Fury is being anchored live from Cheyenne by Andrea Joyce, who will begin a series of reports. Andrea?
Harry, we can barely hear you, but we will tell you right now that Cheyenne is beginning to dry out, but scenes like this are very common across the city. Roads are still completely covered with waters in some areas of the city. Cars are stranded, and there's still quite a big mess out here, and Cheyenne has been left with an unbelievable mess. Every place we went today, we found the same thing. We found tons of mud and tons of debris. There is going to be an incredible cleanup here, all of that left behind by last night's storm. In some neighborhoods, bailing out of basements had to be accompanied by digging out cars and yards from mountains of hail. It looked like a summertime blizzard. Traffic was heavy as people slowed down to look at the damage and to really shake their heads in disbelief, and we did that several times today. And it is clear that it is going to be a long time before things get back to normal here. The storm hit yesterday evening, early evening, and it really did paralyze Cheyenne for several hours and throughout the night. Lance Hernandez was here all night long, and he was here when it was really at its worst. Lance?
Andrea, that storm started out like any other. Towering clouds, rain, thunder, and hail. But this was no ordinary storm.
It started raining around 6 o'clock yesterday, and it kept raining and raining. Soon the streets turned into raging rivers with up to 4 feet of water, full of all kinds of debris, including hundreds of autos. Most of the people we talked to agreed it was the worst storm they'd ever seen.
We were stranded in the Oriental House down there for, I'd say, about 4 hours solid. And there was an ice pack moving about, I'd say about a foot deep of just the hail that came down. And then the water's about, I'd say about 4 or 5 foot deep.
You could not see more than maybe 15 feet in front of your face. If you'd walked out into it, I think the hail probably would have pelted you to death. I mean, that's how hard it was coming, and the wind was blowing that hard.
And with the rain came the hail, tons of it. Here it is piled high along Pershing Boulevard. Nearly 24 hours later, it still remains. By 8 o'clock last night, the situation had become so critical, police ordered all residents off the street. Hundreds were evacuated from their homes because it was feared an upstream dam might collapse. An explosion at police headquarters knocked out power and communications. Slowly, the city is coping with the havoc created by last night's storm.
Last night's storm, Andrea, was one Cheyenne residents won't soon forget, and it's one they'll hope they won't have to experience again. Andrea?
Let's hope not, Lance. You're right. It is one that people will not forget for a very, very long time. Once the rain stopped and the sun came up this morning, people began to look around and try to assess the damage. Ron Parker is standing by live in Chopper 7 right now. He has been surveying the situation all day long. Ron, from what I understand, the damage is going to add up into the millions.
It certainly will, Andrea. The problem with that storm last night is that it hit with such sudden ferocity that there was little time to think about it, let alone get out of its way. The reports of damage are still being tallied, the stories of terror still being told.
Harold Mauch was with his wife and 2-month-old daughter in northern Cheyenne when the water hit.
All of a sudden the water just came and our truck started floating over this way, and I held the emergency brake and everything, and then the water started getting inside the truck. You know, I did more praying in 30 minutes than I've ever did in my life.
This woman was with her baby working in this Chinese restaurant when the wind and water swept through. She was knocked to the floor. Her baby swept from her arms. Her sister was able to save the child. Then they and 13 other customers and employees took refuge atop the restaurant's freezer. Everywhere you looked in Cheyenne today, you saw damage. The force of the flood was clearly evident. Cars were flipped and floated and tossed about like so many leaves. The Civic Center parking lot simply filled up like a giant swimming pool. 1,000-gallon-per-minute pumps were having little effect on the water level. Cheyenne's Holiday Park was also flooded this afternoon. The park was the site of Lake Minnehaha. The lake had returned today, and more storm clouds were gathering. Damage estimates? In the millions, of course. But how do you estimate the damage to families like Jim and Betty Rath? Married just 7 months, they just moved here after their first home was hit by a tornado. Cleanup is going on all over town, but much of it will have to wait until the water recedes. This home felt the full force of a flood of hail, which broke through a window and filled the basement. Yes, that's all hail.
And pictures like that were all over the city this morning. The damage can't be measured in dollars. It has to be measured in human terms. And right now, those storms seem to be to the north and south of Cheyenne. Nothing seems to be threatening Cheyenne from the west, Andrea, so perhaps they'll get off a little better tonight than they did last night.
Let's hope so. And Ron, many of the people that we spoke to today said that they had not been able to contact their insurance companies. So I'm sure that the damage estimate is going to continue to grow as those reports and those estimates begin to trickle in throughout next week, into next week and for several weeks. Many of the families whose homes were destroyed by the flood have had to seek shelter in other areas. And a lot of the relief effort is taking place right in the Denver area. And I believe that Bertha and Harry, you have that story.
We will get to that story, Andrea, but we want to thank you for that report, and we'll check back with you in a little while. Harry?
Bertha, the Red Cross in Denver sent its brand new van to Cheyenne this afternoon. This is the first time the van will be used. It's specially equipped with hot and cold food containers. The van will be used for mass feeding rather than first aid. To contribute to the relief effort, you can send a check to Cheyenne Storm, Mile High Red Cross, Post Office Box 6989. That's Denver 80206. The Salvation Army is also providing meals for Cheyenne flood victims, as well as clothing and shelter. It's looking for volunteers from Denver to go up to Cheyenne tomorrow to help with the cleanup. If you are interested, please call the Salvation Army at 296-2456. That's 296-2456.
Now, if you have family or friends in the area, these are the phone numbers you can call to check on the general situation in Cheyenne. They are Red Cross emergency numbers. Keep that in mind. Only emergency calls, please. The phone numbers are area code 307-638-8906. The second number, area code 307 again, 632-6882. And the third number, same area code, 307-632-6882. 91. Now let's go back live to Cheyenne, where Andrea Joyce is coordinating our team coverage of the Wyoming disaster. Andrea, just how are the residents holding up under all the stress?
Well, Bertha, it never ceases to amaze me in a situation like this how well people hold up. Every neighborhood we went to, people were helping each other. No one is better off than anybody else. One person has 3 feet of water in their basement, one has 5 feet of water in their basement, and they're all helping each other, and they're all out there, and it is incredible. We didn't run across anyone who was unfriendly to us. They were more than happy to show us all of the flood damage and all of the water in their basements. And again, they are going to be cleaning up for quite some time, because some of these basements we were in, we were up to our waist in water. John Bowman has been covering the story from the city officials' end of it, trying to find out what they have been doing to get the situation back to normal up here. He's standing by live in another part of Cheyenne with that story. John?
AJ, everyone's main concern up here is that another thunderstorm doesn't hit at some point tonight. As we've mentioned, this is probably the worst natural disaster to ever hit Cheyenne, with some 40% of the homes having been affected in some way or another.
There's virtually no area of the community that hasn't been touched somehow by either hail, downpour, water in the basements, damage to trees, as well as the injuries and the fatalities that we've had.
While bracing for more rain, a disaster team from the federal government will be assessing damage here today and tomorrow.
These individuals will work with our staffs to assess the damage and to make a determination of our qualification for disaster relief.
The federal representatives from Wyoming have been contacted in Washington. They are preparing some federal disaster declaration papers to send over to the White House. Now, after the assessment team makes its assessment up here of the damage, they will contact the Washington representatives, and that disaster emergency declaration could be declared as soon as Sunday by President Reagan. Then the cleanup could begin here. We might just mention those dams that are just about 25 miles southwest of the city. Last night the mayor indicated that the water levels in those dams was about 10 to 15 feet below the top of the ledge, so there really wasn't any danger of those giving way, and in fact the rain mainly was centered right here in the heart of Cheyenne. With that, back to you, AJ.
Okay, thanks, John, for that report. And as John mentioned, the biggest fear in Cheyenne right now is hovering right up above us. Right now, it's the dark clouds that have been kind of hanging around Cheyenne throughout the day. Some have moved in without any rain. Some have just been kind of hanging around. And as you can tell, it is very windy up here, and it looks as though it is going to storm at some point. Ron Allen, we would like to go to you right now and find out what the weather forecast is for the Cheyenne area. Ron?
Thanks, Andrea. Our real concern, of course, is that the wind does make it appear like something could be going on. In our live radar, this is Cheyenne, Wyoming, right here. As you can see, there is all kind of activity to the southwest of the city of Cheyenne. So the National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm watch until 9 o'clock tonight. However, there is some positive news in all of this. These are not the same kind of atmospheric conditions now as existed last night. For one thing, the development of these storms is further away from the foothills. That's a very important factor. Also, we've been watching it on radar for several hours. There has been movement. They do not appear to be the stationary kind of storms that opened up on Cheyenne last night. So that also is a key factor. They are not stationary. The movement has been to the northeast, and there's higher winds aloft, up at about 14,000 feet. The wind is blowing pretty good. Last night there was no wind in the upper atmosphere to blow those things out of there, and they just stayed there and just drained on the people. The wind is blowing in the upper atmosphere, and that's a good sign. So it may rain there, but it probably will not be anything like last night.
All right, well, that's the last thing they need. It's a good thing to know it's going to move on if it does hit.
Right.
All right, thanks very much, Ron. Still ahead on 7 News, Cheyenne is not a stranger to sudden disaster, and Andrea Joyce is live in Cheyenne with more.
Harry, we are also going to have a story coming up for you on how one neighborhood is coping in Cheyenne. There may be plenty of sore backs tomorrow, but one thing is sure, there are lots of strong hearts in that neighborhood.
Okay,
and
thanks,
also
Andrea.
Just ahead, more live coverage as Cheyenne feels nature's fury.
Nature's fury may be over for the time being in Cheyenne, but the story continues as people there try to pick up the pieces. Let's go back live now to Andrea Joyce, who is field anchoring our complete team coverage of that tragedy. Andrea.
Bertha, I'll tell you, it is going to take quite some time to pick up all of the pieces up here. I think that you can tell from many of the pictures that we've been showing you, this is just one big mess up here. There is mud and dirt everywhere. In homes where the water came in, it just brought in a wall of mud and dirt, and it is going to be quite a big cleanup. Even if we don't get any more rain, cleanup is really the story tonight, and Stephanie Marusic joins us now. I understand you're going to be covering that tonight.
Well, Andrea, as you know only too well from being out here today, even if a storm weren't looming over the heads of the people here in Cheyenne, there would be a lot of work for them here tonight with cleanup, relief, rescue work. But that threat does exist. As you said, it is blowing and windy, and it sure looks like it's going to storm. Reporter John Bowman will continue with city officials. They're the core of all the operations here on relief and rescue. I will be once again in the neighborhoods where it unleashed and caused all the flooding that you see behind us here right now. So we will have a couple of live reports for you tonight at 10 o'clock.
I would imagine, too, that even if it just rains a little bit up here tonight, it's just going to make a bigger mess.
Oh, absolutely. What they need is a break. They don't need more water. Yes, last night's storm was certainly not the norm, but they could use a dry spell here.
Sure could. Thanks, Stephanie. One of the things that we found out from one family that we talked to is they had a pump that they just went and bought, and it was only pumping out an inch of water at a time, and they had 5 feet of water in their basement, so it is going to take an awfully long time. Those people, though, that we talked to were being helped by their neighbors who had 6 feet of water in the basement, and their things were floating around in the basement apartment, and it was just incredible to us to watch all of these people work together, and that certainly is something that they can all use and need when a tragedy like this hits.
It scared us half to death. We didn't know what we was going to do. We've got about 5 foot of water in our basement. Things are just floating everywhere.
And you look down Pershing and down Duff, you know, and it was like a regular river. It scared us to death, and so we went upstairs. We had 2 more stairs we could climb, and that was it.
If fear prevailed last night, the overwhelming feeling today is one of shock and total disbelief. Foundations of homes were washed out, basement apartments destroyed.
You're looking at my chair floating around in my bedroom and my bed floating around in my bedroom.
Duff Street residents bailed out with anything that could hold water. Homemade pumping systems sat on every lawn. Snow shovels were dusted off to dig through tons of hail that had created all of these summertime icebergs.
It was just very cold and hard. You could almost walk on top of them, but break through every once in a while. It's like you weren't even in Cheyenne. You were in the Arctic.
The destruction on Duff Street will add up to thousands, but one thing that wasn't lost in the high waters and heavy hail is the concern for one another.
Like last night, everybody was flooded. See the line over there? And everybody's sticking their head out of windows. Are you okay? Are you okay? Then normally, you don't even say hi.
There wasn't much time to say hello and things like that. It was really, how are you? Are you all right? Do you need anything? And we watched that go on Duff Street, and we watched it in several other neighborhoods around Cheyenne. Ron Parker is up in Chopper 7 right now. We heard him a couple of minutes ago, and he's got a better bird's eye view to give us an idea of what kind of weather, what the weather picture looks like from up in the chopper. Ron?
Andrea, from where we can see right now, it doesn't look too bad right now. There are some other storms developing to the northwest of Cheyenne, but we can't see them. The ones we see are behind me, and that's to the south of Cheyenne. But even now, nearly 24 hours after this disaster, you can see the incredible amounts of water that still remain. Several impromptu lakes have sprung up all over the city. The rivers are still out of their banks. People are still trying to figure out what they're going to do once the water goes down, fearful of what they're going to find once that water goes down. So tonight may be a little easier. It's got to be easier on Cheyenne than last night was. But right now, there's sun shining on most of the city. But you can see in the picture the many, many lakes and standing water that's all over this place. It's going to take days to clean it up. Andrea?
Ron, where we are right now, the sun is out once again, and hopefully it's going to stay out at least until the sun goes down. Once again, water everywhere, mud. The biggest story right now is the cleanup, I believe. And as Lance said earlier, and as everyone else has repeated, this is one storm that Cheyenne will not soon forget. Bertha, Harry?
All right, Andrea, thanks very much. You're drawing a crowd behind you, and we'll check back with you a little later.
Andrea Joyce reporting live from Cheyenne. Wet phone cables in Cheyenne still are causing lots of trouble. The situation is being closely monitored here in Denver at AT&T's intra-regional office. Of the 1,200 calls being attempted every 5 minutes, about half are being blocked by AT&T. Of those that are getting through on this end, only about 60 calls make it all the way through to the Mountain Bell switching in Cheyenne.
My advice is, unless you absolutely need to talk to someone in Cheyenne, don't call in. Give Mountain Bell a chance to get their equipment restored. If there's somebody in Cheyenne that you know and they have a problem or need you, they will be able to call out.
Calls out of Cheyenne are being completed. It's expected to take several days before Mountain Bell crews get the cables dried out so normal service can be restored. That is, of course, if more rain doesn't fall. Bertha?
It's been more than 6 years since another devastating storm hit Cheyenne. On a July afternoon in 1979, a massive tornado cut an 8-mile path through the northern part of the town. It destroyed or damaged almost 500 homes. 40 people were hurt, and a 14-month-old boy was killed. That tornado was called the most damaging in Wyoming history. The rebuilding process took months. And now, of course, Cheyenne is faced with another natural disaster from which it is challenged to recover.
There's lots more news today. Coming up next, the glory fades as hard work begins for a Denver pioneer feminist.
And Jake Jabs loses a round in his fight to qualify as a GOP candidate. The 7 News team is still following late-breaking developments in Cheyenne this evening, and joining us live again is Andrea Joyce. Andrea, what's the situation now?
Bertha, as we've been telling you, the situation is improving here. The waters have receded considerably. One thing that has struck us also is that in Denver, whenever we have a flooded street from some flash flooding, there are always children in the street in a rowboat or playing, riding their bikes through it. We really haven't seen much of that at all up in Cheyenne, and I would imagine it is because they are all helping clean up. Everybody has a bucket or something that will carry water, and everybody is helping in the cleanup effort. Once again, just recapping for you, our last reports, 11 people died during this storm. 7 people are still missing, and at least 70 others are injured. And we will, of course, be here throughout the evening bringing you up to date on the weather and everything else that's going on with the cleanup efforts here in Cheyenne. Bertha, Harry?
All right.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Andrea, and we'll be going back to Cheyenne again.
That's right, and our congratulations, of course, to everybody up there working on that team coverage. Still ahead on 7 News, a vacant lot could become the scene of a heated battle. We'll tell you about it next. Let's go back now to Andrea Joyce, who's been holding down the fort up at 7 News North in Cheyenne. Andrea?
Bertha, I know you've been there for the hour, and for the people at home who have been here throughout the entire hour with us, you've probably noticed that the water behind us has receded considerably. Things really are beginning to dry up, and as you can see, the people behind me are cleaning up all kinds of debris from trees and mud and soot and all kinds of things like that. John Bowman and Stephanie Marusich are staying up here throughout the evening, and they will be having reports for you tonight at 10 o'clock. John Bowman will take you to a shelter to find out what kind of aid is being offered to the people who've been forced out of their homes. And Stephanie will go back into the neighborhoods like these and others that have been hit harder by hail and rain, and she will have a report on the cleanup efforts. So we will have plenty of new developments for you tonight at 10 o'clock on Night Beat. Bertha?
All right, Andrea, thanks very much for that report. Let's get an update now on what's happening with the weather.
Ron Allen.
Things are getting better. Not only the water's receding there, but it looks like some of the storm watches are going to be taken down also. First of all, we have the severe thunderstorm watch for eastern Wyoming until 9 o'clock tonight. We can look at that on our Cheyenne radar, and you can see this is Cheyenne, Wyoming right here, and of course just to the southwest of that area, there's a little bit of storm activity going on at this hour. Now there is a severe thunderstorm warning that's about to expire. We'll show you that one now live on our radar up around Fort Collins, and if you look closely, there's a little flashing area right in there, and that's actually about half the size as it was a half an hour ago when we talked. So that one has diminished greatly. Drake had 1 inch in diameter hail about 25 minutes ago. So we think that tonight most of the storm activity is going to be north of the metro area, and anything that happens around the Cheyenne area should not be as heavy as last night, primarily because the winds are keeping the storms moving. Now then, our Denver forecast for tonight, a thunderstorm is still possible for the next couple of hours. We'll go for 60 as the overnight low. For the weekend, tomorrow, partly cloudy, 82 degrees for tomorrow, and again a chance of an afternoon thunder shower on Saturday afternoon. Sunday, hopefully, will be dry, sunny during the morning. If you're up early Sunday morning, you'll get some sunshine, but during the afternoon, partly cloudy, Sunday's high 85, and on Monday, partly cloudy, 84 degrees, and then the outlook for Tuesday, thunder showers return to the picture and the high of about 86 degrees.
All right, Ron, thanks very much. Okay. And you, of course, will be keeping an eye on those watches and warnings.
We'll be here all night.
Come in. Thanks very much. Last night's storm was very real, a very real nightmare for the people of Cheyenne. Amidst that nightmare, there are a number of stories of incredible bravery and heroism. Larimer County Sheriff's Deputy Robert Van Allen was described by his lieutenant as an excellent officer and a brave officer. In the midst of last night's chaos, Van Allen, tied by a rope to a telephone pole, managed to save 2 people from a car submerged in Dry Creek. He went back once more for a small girl. The rope snapped. Both bodies were found early this morning. Judy Brayton, a National Guard member, lives in an area hardest hit by the storm. She coordinated efforts to save the lives of 5 people whose cars were swept away by that storm. For 2 hours, Brayton stood waist deep in icy water, calling to the victims, who managed to stay alive by chaining themselves to a piece of heavy equipment. One of the victims died. Brayton, along with members and neighbors of Guardsmen, opened a neighborhood first aid station. Late last night, Governor Ed Herschler activated the Guard, and Brayton and her friends spent the rest of the night on guard duty.
Never cease to be amazed by these stories of personal risk and heroism, and they break your heart, but they can also reaffirm your faith in the human spirit. And here's another example that's in our own backyard. Kim Radio here in Denver has organized a relief fund for the Cheyenne flood victims. You can send your donations, a check or a money order, to the radio station at 1095 South Monaco Parkway. That's here in Denver, 80231. The funds will go directly to authorities in Cheyenne for cleaning up and rebuilding that town.
And this just in, Texas authorities say a Delta Airlines jet has crashed and exploded this evening north of the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. Officials are reporting mass casualties. A pilot who witnessed the crash says there is nothing left of the jet. As we get more information on this story, we will make it available to you. That is it for our 5 o'clock report this evening. Thank you for joining us.
We, of course, will have the latest on the flood in Cheyenne and that plane crash at 10 o'clock. We'll see you then. Good night, everyone.
has been a presentation of KMGH 7 News, serving the people of the Mountain States for more than 31 years.